Okay, good evening everybody and welcome to tonight's GNR meeting held virtually on this evening of the 22nd of October 2020. Just before we go into the full issue of the meeting, we had news earlier this week of the passing of a former councillor, Ken Bull, and I would just like to say if there's anybody who would like to make a comment about him, but I would like to hold a minute's silence after that the people have made any comments they wish to make. He was a very lovely person. I used to know him when I was a young girl. I used to live in Norbury, of which he was a ward member then. He did a lot of years within the council, and he looked after his parish as well as the district areas as well. He did a lot. I'll bring in Gary and then I'll move around to anybody else who wishes to say something. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it is a sad passing because Ken was a lovely man and a gentleman, and I got to know him when I came into council in 2007 when he was chairman of the authority, and Sandy and I went to our first civic dinner. So our thoughts, of course, are with his family and friends at this sad time.
Thank you. Councillor Flitter.
Yeah, it's very sad news. I have been in touch with the family. Ken was a dear friend. He didn't share my politics, but we were very, very good friends. He's got a lovely family, and I'm sure he's going to be missed. I certainly will miss that dryness that he had in his when he was speaking. But he was a lovely man, and he was really enthused by the community that he served, and that was the main thing for me. He didn't think on politics to a great deal, but it was the people around him and how he cared, and I really shall miss him.
Thank you, Councillor Flitter. Councillor Mike Ratcliffe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I echo all those comments. Ken was a little bit of a mentor to me when I joined the district council some years ago. Always had time to listen to you, to share his advice. He had huge experience, of course, and I served on a number of planning committees with him. And of course, he was absolutely dedicated to his community. And of course, being in the building profession himself, he knew some of the technicalities that would be presented, of course, on the planning papers. So he was one of those very, very special characters that come along every so often and make authorities a delight to be part of, certainly this district council at the time, and he will be very sorely missed. And of course, as others have said, our condolences go out to his wife and family, of course.
Thank you, Councillor Natton. Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I too worked with Ken when I first joined the district council, and he was a man that would give me great advice and how I should behave and how I should act as a councillor. I've never forgotten that. I remember on many council planning meetings where Ken would just sit there, not say much at all, and really it would just, at the end of an application, he'd come in and he would speak, and everybody listened. And that's the type of man he was. And I knew him and his family in Helen as well. Met him on many, many occasions. And I'm very sad to hear his passing, but my condolences to the family for a great man. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Slack. You need to unmute, Councillor Slack.
Yeah, they were gentlemen. Ken was, and he always made you welcome wherever. When I went down to Norbury when I was civic chair for an event, he was a really nice person, a real gentleman, and there's not many Kens, you know, he were brilliant, Ken. Well, so I shall always remember Ken. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else wishing to make any condolences? Or within that then, Councillor Raw, I'll just inform you that we are going to be holding a minute's silence now for an ex-councillor who passed away this week. So can I take it that we'll have a minute's silence now? Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, for that. Right, we will move now into the main meeting. Could I ask, are there any apologies, please?
Chair, I've just received apologies from Councillor Elliott.
Councillor Elliott. Okay, thank you for that. Upon that, can we just have a quick roll call, please, of everybody? Just to make sure you all can hear and see. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. If you could just indicate whether you're present when I call your name out. Thank you. Councillor Allison.
Here.
Councillor Archer.
Here.
Councillor Bull.
Here.
Councillor Buttle.
Here.
Councillor Chapman.
Here.
Councillor Cruz.
Here.
Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah.
Councillor Flitter.
Here.
Councillor Hill.
Here.
Councillor Hobson.
Here.
Councillor Morley.
Here.
Councillor Purdy.
Yeah.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
Here.
And Councillor Sutton.
Here.
Sorry, Clark, you've missed out Councillor Raw and Councillor Slack.
I have, yes. Sorry, Councillor Raw
Yeah.
and Councillor Slack.
Yes, here.
There's just Councillor Elliott with apologies. Okay, thank you. Moving on to public participation. Do we have any members of the public, any questions being presented?
No, Chairman.
Nothing. Thank you. Item 3, interest. Has any members got any interest to disclose? Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to item 4, future telecommunications. I'd like to bring in Caroline, please.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I just want to say thank you to Ian, who's also on this meeting, for preparing this report. And before I ask members to note this report and approve the business case for a replacement phone system, I would like to highlight that whilst the revenue costs could be potentially significant, it is important to understand the following. Doing nothing is not an option. The current telephone platform is due to be withdrawn in the near future, and upgrading it will have additional costs associated with it. Also, the support for the current system is now only on best endeavour terms, as highlighted in paragraph 2.2. The added functionality and accountability for a newer system will not only have benefits with regards to efficiencies, not only in terms of effective time management, but also potential savings in building costs and mileage, as home working may become a more viable proposition. The current way of dealing with phone calls to facilitate home working due to the pandemic is causing our call-related costs to increase. And as you'll see at paragraph 3.1, the projected spends indicate that this will be in the region of £8,000. And can I just take this opportunity to advise members that once the procurement exercise has been completed, a full detailed report on the type of system and costs will be taken to Council in November for members to consider. Any questions?
Okay then, right, I'm moving to questions, please. Anybody's got anything to ask? Councillor Buttle.
Hi there. Hi, Caroline. I've got a couple of questions. First off is, all right, I assume we're going to do either cloud services or something, the PBX will be present. When we're going with the cloud services, are we thinking Google, Amazon, Microsoft? And what about the renewable usages that their data centers are going to be running the PBX from? I noticed that you haven't mentioned that in the creation of this report that climate change was considered. And I think that's a pretty glaring hole, particularly when we're looking at something which is quite a large investment in something that uses a lot of energy. So I'm a bit curious as to why you chose not to consider climate change.
Can I just stop you into that one a little bit, Councillor Buttle? I appreciate what your questions are in regard to climate change, but as Caroline did state, this is just a report to just set us on the way, and a full report of costings and the benefits and the fors, against, and where and who we're going to go with will be coming to the November meeting. So possibly then your questions of that nature would be answered then.
Okay, well, I'll just throw something in just because like it would be good to, when we have the report that comes back, I really would like to know what the carbon footprint was of the different options. Right. I think that's really important because we're spending a lot of money here and it'd be sensible to spend it sensibly. And I'm interested in whether or not we'll be employing people who have specialist skills. We're interested in upskilling Derbyshire. So if we're sending everything to the cloud, will we be downskilling our workforce? That's kind of where I'm coming from, but I can come up with more. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Purdy, please. Questions?
No questions, Chair, but when you're ready for debate, I'm happy to make a recommendation to the wording of the recommendation, if I may.
I will come back to you then. Thank you, Councillor Purdy. Councillor Flitter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I'm not very well up, as you know, on IT, but I just have a couple of questions, and I'll phrase it in as how you answered Councillor Buttle, that we're going to have another stab at this. When we talk about using cloud service, are we how do we terminate calls on a cloud service? And if there's no charges, how are they covered? Who's picking up the cost of an internet charge? That's it, Chair.
Thank you. Caroline, can you answer that one?
Yeah, sure. With regards to the internet charge, it will be across our Wi-Fi. So we're hoping if this is a cloud-based system, obviously I'm preempting almost because we don't know whether we're going to have an on-site system yet. It's all dependent on the outcome of the procurement exercise. But if we were to have a cloud-based facility, it would go across our internet and Wi-Fi via the council. Does that answer?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just as an ongoing from that, are the capabilities of the town hall and so forth capable of a full cloud service?
To be fair, that would need to be established once we know what system we're going for. Full tests would be undertaken before we commit ourselves. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Ian.
No, I was going to say exactly the same. Sorry, I preemptively jumped in a little bit there. A proof of concept will be specified for any system that we propose to take up prior to contract signing, to be honest.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ratcliffe, thank you. Question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think my question actually has been answered.
Okay.
Is Ian Brailsford from the IT partnership?
No, I'm working with Glenn Burton in
Ian,
there's a very strange echo going on, but I'm working with Glenn in digital transformation at the minute.
my question was to actually ask whether we have sought the advice of the IT.
Yes, we have.
Yeah, the Joint ICT Service have got 2 representatives on the project team who are looking into this. So we've sought their advice from the beginning.
Yeah, good.
Thank you, Councillor Ratcliffe. Councillor Slack. Question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On 4.5, 4.6, there's a big variation from Clyde to the PBX. Though PBX is lower running costs, which, in your opinion, Caroline and the experts, which is the best system?
To be honest, I think that's to be determined once we've gone out to procurement and we see what additional features that each system can provide us. We will go with what's most suited to the council, and that will be brought back to you for consideration. At this time, it's very difficult to determine until we know what's out there.
Thank you.
Councillor Allison, a question?
Thank you. Yes, Chair, I've got a question. It relates to the time frame for this. I know in the report that the current support contract goes until July 2021. Are you anticipating that this system, whatever one you go with, will be procured and installed and up and running by July 2021, or are you specifying it to be done earlier than that?
We are looking to hopefully have an indication to procure and report to you for approval in November. Once a decision's been made there, we're hoping to install, dependent on supplier and availability, January 2021. Urgency is a prior consideration, to be fair.
Okay, and you think that that's achievable?
We're hoping so. Until we get the submissions back from the tender and we see what availability they have from the companies themselves, it's just we're in a position that we need to resolve it, and the pandemic has brought it forward with regards to home working and to help facilitate all the services within the council.
Okay, thank you.
Very much. Okay, I think we've exhausted questions, so I'm going to move to debate, and I will move back down to Councillor Purdy, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'd just like to strengthen the recommendations, if I may. It's not a criticism of the Office of Recommendations in any way, but I do think it makes it clearer if I read my wording out shortly, and the need to pin down, bring a report back to Council. Now, Caroline has mentioned that, but I just think it ought to be in the recommendation. So my wording, Chair and James, is that delegated authority is granted to officers to investigate a business case for a new telephony system for the authority, to invite tenders for procurement, and to then report the business case back to the November full council meeting with costings and recommendations, which hopefully are ready by then. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does that find a seconder anywhere? Thank you.
I'm happy to second, Chair. As Caroline has already said, doing nothing is not an option, and we need to get on and deal with this. I take on board, and I'm sure everybody does, Councillor Buttle's comments about climate change. This is a priority for this council, but we've got to get things moving. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ratcliffe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll certainly support this, and the fresh wording that Councillor Purdy has brought in on the recommendation. I mean, it's a report, of course, that has a degree of technical sophistication, as it were, and some of it, of course, I'm quite sure is a little over our heads. But I did look particularly at the costing, and I think there's a case made out that in the long run, we're actually saving money. But the important factor that arose for me, and I think it goes some way to addressing some of those concerns that Councillor Bottle raised about the need to have embedded with just about everything now that we look at is this notion of how is it addressing climate change, carbon emission. Is this point about home working? More and more of our staff will be working at home in future, not just are now, but they're quite likely to remain there. I think even if we achieve some resolution of the COVID crisis. So I think it's important in some degree there that we provide the backup for them to be able to continue, with their work successfully at home. So I'm very much in a supportive role on this.
Yes, thank you. Well, I hope Caroline and Ian will take all that on board to be putting into the next report that's brought forward as regards climate. Councillor Slack, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I support this, Chair, because a lot of people are going to, although we're working from home through the coronavirus, this is going to continue. I think we should see a lot more Zoom meetings even after we get the vaccine. Because it's cost effective. I mean, it saves people using the car, using carbon, going to town hall, and also the town hall's not in use, so it's saving on other areas. So yeah, it's quite a bit of money, but we've got to have the best really if we're going to be working from home, officers and staff. So yeah, I fully support this, Chair.
Well, I'm sure that the monetary will be on the table when it comes back, and it'll be down to us members to make that decision whether we spend on the amount that needs to be spent or not. Councillor Raw, thank you.
Yes, just on the tender, I'd like it including within the scoring of the tender the climate impact, so that that's considered as well as cost in who the council decides to award the tender to.
Yeah, I think that's already been pushed over by Councillor Butler initially, but it will be taken on board. Thank you, Councillor Raw.
So within the amendment that that Gary's put forward, he mentioned cost effective. Can we have also within that environmental impact with consideration for cost and environmental impact, please?
Councillor Purdy, would you have any regards onto that?
I've got no problem with that. I think members ought to realise that everything we do now is embedded with our climate change agenda, and it runs through everything we do, and officers are aware of that. And I don't think we need to keep spelling it out, but for the sake of this meeting, I've no problem in adding and take on board however wording we want to put it to recognise the impact that this telephony system might bring with regard to our green energy agenda.
Thank you.
Does that sit okay with yourself, James? Thank you. Councillor Hobson, you seconded this?
Yes, I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Flitter.
Yeah, just to say that I think that this is a report that we have to support. I mean, my view of IT, it is very expensive. It is very technical, and it changes all the time. What we have to do if we're going to succeed as a council is have the proper equipment in place to service our needs. And it's obvious that at the moment that's becoming very difficult. So I shall certainly lend my support.
Thank you. Councillor Allison.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to support this, and I hope that the cloud solution will be adopted. I think as a council, it gives you more resilience, business continuity, disaster recovery capabilities if you do have products in the cloud and services in the cloud. I think I've not seen it. I don't know whether it exists anywhere, but I wonder if the council has a cloud adoption strategy for services that are coming to end of life. I've seen an IT strategy, but I've not seen anything like that included. And I think it's something that probably we do need to consider as more services are becoming redundant and unsupported.
Right.
Thank you.
Upon that, we'll take that as a note of what you've put in as about a strategy, but obviously this is not for this agenda at this moment in time. I don't have anybody else to speak. So the motion is on the table, the proposal is on the table. Is everybody clear about the proposal? I take that as yes, so it's been proposed and second. Could I have a vote, please? Can we go to the vote? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. If you could indicate whether you're for, against or abstain. Councillor Ellison.
For.
Councillor Archer.
For.
Councillor Bull.
For.
Councillor Buttle.
For.
Councillor Chapman.
For.
Councillor Cruz.
For.
Councillor Donnelly.
For.
Councillor Flitter.
For.
Councillor Hill.
For.
Councillor Hobson.
For.
Councillor Morley.
For.
Councillor Purdy.
For.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
For.
Councillor Raw.
For.
Councillor Slack.
For.
And Councillor Sutton.
For.
That's unanimous.
Thank you very much. That motion is carried. Move on to item 5. Adoption of procedure for standards hearings into alleged breaches of the Members' Code of Conduct. Bring James in for this one, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a very brief report introducing a proposed procedure for hearing panels to consider complaints under the Member Code of Conduct. Presently, we do not have such a procedure in place, and as the report sets out, we're required to have such a procedure under the Localism Act 2011. The procedure that is appended to the report is based on good practice from other authorities and is set out in some detail for you to consider this evening. Just to say that there is a matter that requires urgent attention, which is why this paper has been brought to you at this special meeting. So I am recommending that procedure is approved, and we can give it immediate effect to undertake the hearing that is required to be held imminently. So I'm happy to take any questions that members may have, but I recommend the procedure as set out, Chair.
Questions, Councillor Flitter?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just two things that concern me a little bit on this.
It's a question.
I know, sorry?
Is this a comment or question?
It's a question.
Right, okay, thank you.
A couple of things here. When we come to representation, I believe that it's a member's right to have somebody with them representing them. And yet in the report, it does state with the permission of the hearing panel, of which I'm not too happy with. And then under 12, we've got the same with whether we decide whether it's in public or private session. It again is down to the view whether it's necessary by the hearing panel. Surely the councillor who is being brought to justice, so to speak, has a right to have their view. Just wondered if there's any comment on whether that wording could be slightly changed.
James, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flitter. I think in terms of whether the meeting is open or not, that wouldn't be a matter for the subject member to determine whether that should be open. That, just as you as a committee consider whether you go into into a confidential part of the meeting for an exempt item, so too in this case you would, as a hearing panel, be asked to consider the necessity to go into an exempt hearing. And due to the nature of many complaints that are received, it would be necessary to go into exempt into confidential session for that. These procedures aren't, as the procedure itself says out, they're not compliant, or perhaps compliance not the right word, they don't reflect the provisions within our own procedurals, because it's a different type of process that's being followed here. We're not, this isn't committee stage, this is a hearing. Effectively, you're being asked to give a judgment on a set of facts and evidence and information that are put before you. So I think in that sense, it's entirely appropriate for a hearing panel to make that determination. In terms of whether the member can have representation with them and it being a matter for the hearing panel, I think that is in there because occasionally, and in my experience at other authorities, members have tried to bring persons that aren't always appropriate. And I'm not saying that this would be something that would be an issue in Derbyshire Dales, but there have been instances at other authorities where I've been privy to these processes, and people that shouldn't have been in the room were brought as representatives to support a member. And that's why I think that provision's in this procedure, so that you can form a view as a hearing panel as to whether it is appropriate for that individual to be in there. Bear in mind some of the complaints that potentially could be coming. There may be other elements to them which members might not be privy to. And I think it would be incumbent on me or the deputy monitoring officers who'd be supporting the process to advise the hearing panel as to whether there was an issue or not. But ultimately, the hearing panel is responsible for the discharge of its functions set out in this procedure. I would imagine in the vast majority of cases, if not all, that wouldn't be an issue.
Does that satisfy your question, Councillor Flitter?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I do understand that a lot of this is down to protocol, but it is dealt with by a case-by-case situation. I quite understand the response from James, and I thank him for that.
Thank you. Councillor Ratcliffe, question, please.
Yes, I have three questions, James, if I may. A very general one to begin with. This authority has been dealing with complaints under the members' code of conduct for some years. What is it that has prompted this need for the hearing panel? Is it just a change in national policy that's brought this about? Second question, I'll go through them all to begin with. If it's a member of this authority who is having a complaint considered, how does the hearing panel maintain objectivity and independence? And my last question, I understand that the hearing panel is about to convene fairly soon. How are we going to select those members? Will there be some form of rotation of panel members drawn from the GNR committee?
James, thank you.
Thank you. So in dealing with the first one, it's probably a case of paying tribute to your previous monitoring officer. In the 8 years since these provisions came into being, it hasn't been necessary to hold a hearing under these procedures. Sandra, I think, has managed to resolve everything informally, so there actually hasn't been a requirement to get to this stage. However, as Sandra's gone and I've arrived, regrettably, there is a case that I need to bring to a hearing panel, and that. To jump between your questions, Councillor Ratcliffe, in terms of the third question around rotation of members, there is already an existing delegation to me as monitoring officer in the scheme of delegation to select members for hearing panels in consultation with the chairman of the licensing and appeals panel. And with regard to a forthcoming hearing, whilst no formal arrangements have been made yet, informal consultation has taken place with the chairman of the licensing and appeals committee, and potential members have been contacted. And I think we would look to try and rotate the members who are going to sit on those panels subject to availability to actually get more experience amongst the membership of the council to deal with these cases. And then finally, your second question in terms of the objectivity of members dealing with cases related to councillors from the district council. You're all bound by the code of conduct, and that means that you have to be objective in discharging your functions. And if you find that you have a conflict of interest or you already have a view on something, you are duty bound by law to declare that interest, and you wouldn't be able to participate in a hearing panel in that case. So if you were approached by colleagues in democratic services as to your availability and they provided you with details of a case, as probably is the case when you're asked to get involved in a licensing matter, you would declare that you had an interest at that point and couldn't participate. So that would answer that question. Hopefully I've covered everything there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Allison.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. The first one relates to appeals. I note that there is no right of appeal against any decision of the hearing panel, but I am aware that a complainant can make an appeal to the local government ombudsman, and I wonder why that hadn't been included in that. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong in that, obviously. The second question is relating to the sanctions that can be imposed. There's nothing specified, and I would have thought that we should actually be specifying what sanctions could be imposed by the hearing panel. I think it makes it clearer and gives more clarity around what a hearing panel can actually, ask to be done. So yeah, those are my questions.
Thank you. James.
Thank you, Councillor. So in terms of appeals, this is as I say, it's a different set of arrangements in terms of dealing with code of conduct matters, and it sits outside of the usual framework for making a complaint. And the hearing panel is the end of the road, so to speak, in terms of the process in determining whether a member has breached the code. Members of the public, complainants can refer the process that's been followed in determining that to the local government ombudsman, and I'm more than happy to incorporate that into the procedure note if members wish for that to be incorporated. In terms of the sanctions, there's a separate document that was written in 2012 setting out the sanctions that are available, and what this document does is completes that suite of documents that deal with the code of conduct, the way in which members are expected to act, and the process by which we will determine complaints. What this process doesn't set out is the initial part of the process, which, for the benefit of other members of the committee and those watching on the live stream, when a complaint's made, it comes to me as monitoring officer initially to make an assessment as to whether that complaint is valid or not. And that's the stage where all of the complaints that would have been received between 2012 and now have got to, and then at that point they've either been determined that they're not a complaint or a valid complaint under the code of conduct, or they've been assessed and there's been a view that more training is required, or someone should give an apology, or there's no case to answer, and that's verified by the independent persons, of which we have two, Steve Dunning and Matthew Kane, and they're consulted by me or by the deputy monitoring officers when determining that. So as I say, there's a suite of documents that fill this process, and it probably would have been advantageous to included that with the papers this evening, given that that was put in place in 2012, and in retrospect that would have been helpful. But I'll happily share that with members after the meeting if that would be appropriate. But in terms of sanctions that are available, every report that would come to a hearing panel would set out the sanctions available to members. For those of you who've been around a long time, pre-2012, you recall that the standards regime had more teeth, so to speak, than it does presently. And some of the examples I've just given around apologies or training from the monitoring officer, whatever it is, tend to be the more common sanctions that are deployed in dealing with complaints under the code of conduct since 2012. Hopefully I've answered your questions there, Councillor Allison.
Yeah, I think so. It's just that looking around at other councils' policies, they do actually, in the body of their policies, put down those sanctions. So I just looked at ours and thought, oh, where's that bit? So anyway, you've explained that it's in another document, so that's good. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Donnelly.
Are we in debate? No questions?
No question. Question?
No question, no, just debate.
Okay,
I'm not
thank
for
you.
debate.
Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question, Chair. I would have thought it had been far better if councillors from a neighbouring authority and vice versa would have been on the panel, because we know each other on this council. And it's very difficult sometimes if you know someone to sit in judgment. So I would have thought it would be better if a neighbouring authority could, councillors could take part, and we could do the same, vice versa. Is that possible, James?
James.
Unfortunately, it's not possible, Councillor Slack. I think if it had have been, we would have looked at it, and other authorities would be following that. But that's where the independent person comes into play. And in other authorities,
yeah, independent.
There are town and parish councillors who sit on what effectively would be a joint committee to deal with standards and ethics. So you had representation from all of the tiers affected by the code of conduct. And whilst I've not brought that forward at this stage, this might be something that we might want to think about further down the line, because in my experience, you tend to get more complaints arising from town and parish councils than you do from principal authorities such as the district council. So there may be some benefit in looking into that further down the line, but I think at this stage, the important part is just to get this procedure into place.
Thank you, James.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman, questions?
Yes, Chair, but it has been partially answered by Councillor Allison's question on the level of sanctions. Just a quick one, James. What is probably the ultimate sanction that can be enforced by a hearing panel?
So the hearing panel would make a recommendation to the council, be that the district council or the town and parish council of the subject member. And I think in terms of the sanctions or the recommended sanctions available, you're probably looking at removal of facilities. So, if we're in the town hall saying that a member might not come into the town hall, that they'd be removed from a particular committee, or they have a certain responsibility removed from them. But all of the things that a reasonable person might consider to be a reasonable sanction aren't available. So you couldn't require a member you couldn't say, right, you have to resign. You couldn't say your allowance could be taken away from you. There's nothing like that available. So I think simply removing from a committee, if they were a chairman or a vice chairman of a committee, you could potentially remove them from that special responsibility position. But beyond that, there's very little teeth in the standards regime presently.
Thank you for that. Councillor Cruz, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a couple of questions from me. I'm just wondering if any training is going to be put into place to make sure that everybody is brought to a certain level of understanding, because people may have had experience of running these hearings, or they may not have had experience of running hearings or similar types of activities. So I'm just wondering if that's something that's being considered. And another question is around, I think we've touched on it, and I don't want to duplicate, but I do want a bit of clarity on how is the hearing panel constructed. And I think it was Councillor Slack who mentioned other authorities. I thought that we may be going down that road. And you said it's not possible, James, and I'm just curious as to why it's not possible. Is it not possible short term, or is it something I think you said we might be looking at? So if you could give me a little bit of clarity on that, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
So through you, Chair. In terms of training, yes, there will be training provided. And I think I think there's a broader need for some refresher training on the code of conduct and associated processes around that. And we've covered some of this in terms of the planning ethics training recently, but I think there's a broader training requirement just to revisit what was done in the induction process last year. In terms of the membership and makeup of hearing panels, so just to be clear, the membership of that panel presently can only be taken from this committee, because it is effectively a subcommittee of GNR. And the way that we would look to do it, whilst I'm your monitoring officer at least, is to try and ensure that when we're dealing with complaints, complaints about district councillors, but also for the time being about town and parish councillors, we would ensure that those panels were politically representative of the makeup of the council. And then we would invite the independent person to be present. You know, as I mentioned, we have 2 independent persons, Steve Dunning, who attended council the other week, and there's another independent person called Matthew Kane. So we do have a backup if another independent person is ruled out. But what we don't have at present is any provision for town or parish council representation on a hearing panel. And when you're dealing with complaints relating to town and parish councils, it might be helpful to have somebody who's operating at that level. I'm conscious that there's an awful lot of district councillors who are parish and town councillors, but there are some who aren't, and sometimes it would be beneficial to have that formal representation from the district, from the town or parish in that process. So that would be something that we may wish to look at when we get to May time, when we're looking at the constitution and things like that. But at this point in time, the membership of the panel is purely from the district council.
Thank you for that, James. Thank you. Okay, I see no more questions here, so we'll move into debate. We'll move back to Councillor Darnley.
Well, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm very pleased. Thank you, James, for bringing that forward. I think that for some time now, over the years, you talk to many parish councillors who probably have complaints and have nowhere to take them. They'll come and say to you, well, what can I do? Like, you know, we're at a situation where we can turn and say, well, hang on, we've got a committee, and you can come to this hearing. I would hope that as we approach this, and as we do on licensing, that all councillors will go in there with a clear mind and non-political mind, and judge as we do on licensing. I hope that explained. I think the other side of the procedures, I think James has explained very well. So in that, I'm very happy to move the proposition.
Thank you. Okay, does that find a seconder? Councillor Flitter, would you like to second that?
Yes, I'll second that, Chair, because I have got experience. I was on a standards board for 16 years, and it's not a very pleasant situation to be in sometimes. I'm surprised when I heard James tell me the updated situation with local authorities not using partnerships to look at this, because that's what happened a few years ago with this council, where a member was brought to task. It was dealt with by an independent person, and it was dealt with outside the Derbyshire Dales. And I thought that was a very clear understanding and a good way of working. But if rules have changed, then rules have changed. So there would be concern at the end of the day about complete impartiality. But nevertheless, we're going down the right way. We're starting off with this. It is really a national thing of protocol and adapted to local circumstances. And if there are any misgivings, then we look at it in more detail. But we do have to start somewhere, and I think James has done a good job. So I'll second this.
Thank you very much. Councillor Purdy, do you wish to speak?
It was no question, Chair, sorry. James.
Yeah, we're on debate now. Yeah, we're on debate. Thank you.
Okay, I'll ask the question after the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Michelle Morley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to say thank you, Councillor Flitter. You beat me to it. I was going to second this motion. I think from any member's point of view, it's always nice to know what the parameters are, and also in addition to that as well, it's nice to see that James is introducing such a procedure, an updated procedure, and then, to be frank, we all know where we stand. So thank you very much. I fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to make any comments within this debate? Upon that, Councillor Cruz.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to support the motion and the introduction of this procedure. It's really a reflection. I'm just wondering, and maybe it's a question to members, which is maybe how it features as part of the debate, but it may end up back with you, James. I'm just wondering how we're going to judge effectiveness of this new procedure. I don't know what people's thoughts are on how we do that.
I think, James, as you said earlier when we were discussing it, when you asked about it coming to a meeting, this is put down because it's all new, and there is an implication where there's something coming up. So I think it will be trialled at that and then come back to see whether it has worked. And I think that's where we'll get a judgment on if this is the procedural way or whether we do need to fully change it. And I'm sure James will bring that back to everybody to be able to look at it again if case arises on that. Does that help you, Councillor Cruz?
Yeah, I think it sounds to me like we'll bring it back through this committee and we'll get feedback as we go. So I'm okay with that, but I do think we do need to keep a kind of review, a checkpoint on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick observation. As I said, if you don't know the person, you get a better result, really. And in the judicial system, where juries, if you know the accused, you're not allowed on that jury, and there's no higher legal process than that, really. So we really should be following the legal system, really.
Well, I think James actually pointed it out at the point of we all have to stand under code of conduct with our own council and the likes. But obviously, as I've said, probably when the hearings have come, if it feels as though that it isn't working, then I'm sure this will be reviewed again under those. Yeah. But we're not judge and jury, I don't believe, as a council. And I don't think the sanctions will be set high enough anyway, because that's not what we're able to do as a council anyway. It's been moved and seconded. I can't see anybody else who wishes to speak. Can I go to the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. If you could indicate whether you're for, against or abstain. Councillor Allison.
For.
Councillor Archer.
For.
Councillor Bull.
For.
Councillor Buffle.
For.
Councillor Chapman.
For.
Councillor Cruz.
For.
Councillor Donnelly.
For.
Councillor Flitter.
For.
Councillor Hill.
For.
Councillor Hobson.
For.
Councillor Morley.
For.
Councillor Purdy.
For.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
For.
Councillor Raw.
For.
Councillor Slack.
For.
And Councillor Sutton.
For.
It's unanimous.
Okay, thank you. So that is moved. Thank you. Okay, item 6, performance management. Key and corporate performance as an indicator outturn for 1920. I shall bring in Steve Capes for that, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and good evening, members. And actually, this is a pretty good news report to bring to members. On the whole, there's some very good news in here. We do, as members know, we monitor how our services are performing, and this report is the delayed report of how they performed in the last financial year. I think there's some key things in there. Overall, there were 27 targets set, and 22 of those were met in full. So 22 out of 27 met in full. There's some highlights that we've set out in paragraph 3.5, and they include some strong performance across a whole range of services, such as we pay our invoices on time. In fact, we pay 82% of them in 10 days, and that's important because most of our suppliers are small businesses. So that's a key thing that we aim to do. Recycling has gone up in the past year. Sickness absence has gone down. There's good performance on processing planning applications and processing benefits claims as well. And as members will see, we've also produced some good performance on providing disabled facilities grants for people in need. There are a couple of areas where performance hasn't quite hit the targets that we set. Two of those, it's described, they're things that have just been delayed. They're carrying forward to next year, and we think they'll be met next year. There's just one that I'm sure members will have noticed. One of the areas where performance wasn't up to target in the table in the appendix isn't mentioned in paragraph 3.6, and that was to do with the Ashbourne airfield. As members will know, that's been a key priority of the council for some time now, to progress the regeneration of Ashbourne airfield, and key to unlocking that site has been commencement of work to build a roundabout and access road. That access road was delayed, but I'm pleased to say that it's now going to start this coming Monday. The contractor is appointed and they start on Monday, the 26th of October. Just one other bit of information in response to an earlier query that I had, and that regards the planning appeals that were overturned by the inspectorate. I'm happy to say that only 2 of those overturns were on the basis of member decisions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for that, Steve. Well, yes, as you said, it looks quite a good news, and through everything that we are going through, you know, with the floods and coronavirus and everything else, we are still trying to keep on top with the resources that we've got to come out with such a good report. So I thank you for that. Are there any questions from any members? Thank you. No? Okay, then I'll lead into debate. Councillor Purdy, please.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if you've got a mover, but I, as leader, want to pay dedication to the staff.
Point of order. I had my hand up for a question.
Okay, excuse me. I said at the time I didn't see that one. Sorry, Councillor. I will come back to you. Councillor Purdy, you can continue, and I will come back to you, Councillor Allison.
Thank you. I want to pay dedication to the staff. They've been under the cosh for a long while now, and I just hope that members appreciate just how hardworking and dedicated our staff are, but not only our staff. Being on leaders' WhatsApp throughout the country, it's the same message throughout from all the leaders in the rest of the country. And it was mentioned to the Minister today on the DCN conference that hopefully that they will recognise just how hardworking and what pressures and stresses local authority staff are under with the continuance of the COVID. And of course, we had previous to that, we had the November floods. So I want to pay that dedication. I know others will join with me in that. We do have our critics. We have one continual critic who thinks this council is not good. This reflects that it is a very good council.
Councillor Allison, a question, thank you.
Question relating to the planning applications. I noted that the KPIs on red. In terms of the fact that there seems to be an increasing trend for appeals to be upheld against councils, what's the benchmark for our authority in that? And also, as we are performing below our target on that, what action plan has been put in place to move that KPI back up to target? Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
That's a very interesting one, Chairman. I mean, we've set ourselves a pretty tight target on that over the years, and that's at no more than 30% of appeals would be overturned. And as you can see, it was been just over 34% in the last year. It is a trend which is on the up, and you know, to some extent, it's more of a reflection on the nature of the development market, of developers perhaps chancing their arms, rather than on the fact that the council is making the wrong decision. As has been pointed out, only 2 of those are member overturns. And in fact, if you were to take those out of the equation, we would have actually hit our 30% target. But you know, members are entitled to make decisions, and on the whole, members and officers are very much in line with these things. So we haven't set any improvement measures in place. It's clearly something that we'll monitor. If it went astronomically high, then we certainly would need to. But you know, on the whole, we are at 34% rather than 30%. It's not as tight as we'd like, but it's I think a reflection of the development industry today.
Okay, so what percentage would trigger an improvement plan?
I don't have a view on that. Something that members might want to have a view on. But you know, at the moment, if we are there and thereabouts, I think we're okay. But it's something that members might want to have a view on themselves.
Okay, thank you.
I think, as we did talk before, Tim Braun does bring issues about planning to us as a report through the term. And maybe that might be some time when we need to discuss if we want to put a percentage in place for these appeals set. And I think that would be something we could look at that time. Councillor Ratcliffe, question?
Yes, please, Chair.
Thank you.
Just a very quick comment, though. I do think, as Steve has indicated earlier, that there are some great strengths in this and good outcomes too. And we should be looking as much as anything at the positive points. Though, of course, this question of the planning appeals has arisen before last year, as I remember, Steve. So there is certainly something here that perhaps would be deserving of a little bit more analysis, some sort of assessment or scrutiny of the inspector's reports to see if there's something there that might be useful in, you know, could feed back into our planning in some way or other. But my question really, Steve, is perhaps putting you on the spot in a sense, but this report on the corporate and service plans, I think covers the period March 19 up to March 20. Yeah. And I wondered really, since that was to some extent outside the COVID period, whether there are any KPIs that you feel are under attack is the wrong word, but that might be affected by the fact that we have been in this situation, since we're already another 5, if not 6 months on from March 20.
Thank you, Councillor. Dave?
Chairman, yes, thanks, Councillor Ratcliffe. And with regard to the planning one, there will be there's a detailed report that Tim will produce, which does dig into a lot more of the underlying stats behind the planning appeals. I can't remember when the last one was, but the next one won't be too far away, I'm sure. Councillor Ratcliffe is quite right. This is looking retrospectively quite a way. We would normally have brought this to members in June, July time. It was then deferred because of the coronavirus emergency, which is why it's coming to you quite late. But we are now 6 months into the current financial year. We will be bringing a report subject to agenda capacity to the 26th of November council meeting on the performance indicators for the first 6 months of this year, quarters 1 and 2. And it will be at that point, Councillor Ratcliffe, that we do know to what extent the undoubted pressures of coronavirus have affected performance. Without having seen the figures yet, I can't comment, but we will be getting them very soon, and you will be seeing them hopefully on the 26th of November.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, no more questions, I don't believe. So I'd like to move to debate. Do I find a proposal for taking recommendations? Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move this report and also to note that wouldn't it be nice if we all had a crystal ball? We do have to work with what we have. I'd like to commend Dr. Capes and his team, who have put all these figures together, who have worked so hard and so diligently to balance the books and certainly to keep Karen happy. But other than that, there are so many different aspects in this report that, and quite rightly, I've listened very carefully to what some colleagues have said. And yes, there are some changes, and I'm sure they will be addressed. Steve and myself are also on the board for Marketing Peak District, and we both have sat there recently in meetings thinking, how on earth is this going to be managed? And it's a huge task that people have got moving forward. So yes, I take the point of the fellow member referring to the future and the current months of COVID since March. But I'm certainly happy to move this report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Morley, could you come back on that last bit, because you seem to blank out. I don't know whether you'd muted before you'd finished your sentence.
Oh, I thought you got bored of me. What did I say? What did you hear?
Could you just repeat your proposal, please?
Yes, I'm very happy to support this report and move the report, and also feel that yes, there will be changes necessary in the months to come. But as it is now, this is fine for moving. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does that find a second? Thank you. Councillor Hobson.
Chair, I'm happy to second this report. Thanks, Steve and the team, for preparing the report. But I'd also like to thank those officers and staff on the ground that are paying those invoices and dealing with that recycling and doing all those other jobs. I think we've got a team in Derbyshire Dales to be proud of. I'm really looking forward to the Ashbourne Airfield starting on Monday. It's been a long time coming, and I know there's been a lot of hard work going into it before this. Thank you.
As much as I would like to see the Ashbourne Airfield going, and I know our Ashbourne ward members will be cringing because it'll cause an absolute nightmare with traffic and the likes when it all gets going. But hopefully it won't take too long, and we won't see them just sat there on a spade. They will get on and get it done. Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would like to pay tribute to Steve and his team as well, because I know it's been something that's been ongoing for a long time, and each time you drive along the 52 and you think, well, what's happening? Nothing's happening. So I'm very pleased to note now that as from next week, everything's going to be on board again. And yes, it's going to be a bit of a disruption, but I think at the end of the day, it'll be well worth it. And I know it's going to be benefit for, not for the industrial estate, but also for the economy of Ashbourne. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Would anybody else wish to make any comments? Then I will go to the vote. Thank you.
Yeah. So we're voting on the recommendations on page 18 of the document package. You can indicate whether you're for or against. Councillor Allison.
For.
Councillor Archer.
For.
Councillor Ball.
For.
Councillor Buttle.
For.
Councillor Chapman.
For.
Councillor Cruz.
For.
Councillor Donnelly.
For.
Councillor Flitter.
For.
Councillor Hill.
For.
Councillor Hobson.
For.
Councillor Morley.
For.
Councillor Purdy.
For.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
For.
Councillor Raw.
For.
Councillor Slack.
For.
And Councillor Sutton.
For.
Unanimous.
Thank you very much. Then I will take that as being moved. And thank you very much again, Steve, and all the officers for working on this report. Okay, we'll move to item 7, Vision Derbyshire and the local government reform. I'd like to bring in Paul Wilson for this one, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, members, there's 2 distinct elements to this particular report before you this evening. The first provides a further update on the Vision Derbyshire project. Members have had 2 previous reports on this matter, the first in January and the second one as recently as July. So hopefully Vision Derbyshire is relatively familiar to most members. And the second aspect of the report is to talk about potential local government reform and around the devolution agenda, which members may well be aware of from very significant recent media coverage. Taking the first issue, Vision Derbyshire, all 9 authorities, county, districts, boroughs across Derbyshire have been continuing to work on the Vision Derbyshire project throughout the COVID experience. And COVID has very much provided a focus for the benefits of greater collaborative working, certainly in terms of our immediate community response and the measures that we've had to put in place, both across the entire Derbyshire geography, but also within individual districts. So the strength of collaborative working has very much proven its value and worth. The Vision Derbyshire project is using the COVID experience as a proposition to demonstrate to government that actually you do not need local government reform to demonstrate efficiency, greater effectiveness and greater resilience in times of crisis. And the main purpose of this updating report is to inform members of the fact that there is a proposition and case for change document which is in preparation, and I had rather hoped to be in a position to bring this and present it to you this evening, but it's not quite formally signed off yet. So it is my intention to bring this back to members in November at the council meeting, whereby you'll be able to see that proposition case for change document in detail. But hopefully there's enough information within the summary of the report to explain the direction of travel in terms of that particular initiative. And really what it's about is developing that shared commitment across all 9 county, district, borough councils to agree to strategically collaborate and improve the outcomes of people and place, enable us to speak with one voice to government, and also to coordinate our resources better, and in the process deliver greater sustainability for all organisations who are under significant financial pressure and are likely to be in that situation for some time to come yet. But I think perhaps most importantly for members, it's just to understand some of the key outcomes that Vision Derbyshire is actually targeting. And there's 5 key outcomes that have been identified. The first one is we want to establish a fairer society where everybody has opportunities in terms of training, development, access to job opportunities. We want to demonstrate that we can actually exceed climate change targets, both targets set at a local level and national level. We want to be able to do more than that, and we want to be able to do it quicker. We want a much more inclusive and diverse economy. We want people to be able to manage their quality of life, health and well-being for themselves with less reliance on the state and formal government structures. And we actually want communities themselves to deliver sustainable change. We want them to take more responsibility for their own environments, for their own lives, for their own communities, and be able to shape those much better, again, without having to rely on local governments and state structures. So that's really what Vision Derbyshire is about. There's an awful lot more to it. And the case for change document itself extends to some 160 pages and 10 separate appendices. So it's quite a tome. And I won't be presenting all of that to members in November, but I will certainly present enough information to you such that you can get a very clear understanding of what it's all about. So what I'm seeking members' agreement to here as part of this report, and in particular recommendation 4, is that the organisation continues to identify Vision Derbyshire as its preferred option for local government reform in Derbyshire. And that is certainly in tune with all other districts and boroughs and indeed the county council. So members will see one of the appendices I've produced is a letter which has been signed by all 9 leaders to the Secretary of State and the Minister, advocating the Vision Derbyshire concept and asking for further dialogue and discussions with government on the benefits of that as opposed to unitarisation. The second part of this paper deals with devolution and local recovery white paper. Now, this is something which has been hailed by government for quite some time now. The publication date has been moved at least 3 times, and after a conference I dialed into today, possibly for the 4th time now, it was expected in October. It's not been published as of yet, and there's been no indication as of today as to when we can expect it to be published. But government is very clear, it will publish a devolution and local recovery white paper. There's been extensive media coverage on this in recent weeks and months, and an awful lot of the coverage has focused upon devolution running hand in hand with local government reform and reorganisation. And that's been seen as a green light for some authorities to push for unitarisation of local government across very significant geographies. What we have been working on as part of Vision Derbyshire seeks to avoid that. But clearly there are different agendas at play, and there may be different propositions come forward in the following months after the publication of the white paper itself. From the District Council's point of view, I think it's really important, and I hope you would agree, that we are in a position to position ourselves whereby we can do the very best for the communities that we serve. And in that respect, I am seeking delegated authority under Recommendation 5 to participate in whatever discussions may emerge in order that I can represent the interests of Derbyshire Dales on your behalf, but also bring back to you any key decisions that need to be made in terms of what propositions may ultimately come forward in light of those devolution proposals and the content of the white paper itself. So that's a very brief overview, Chair, but obviously happy to take any questions that members may have.
Thank you very much for that, Paul. Well, all I would say is if you have got a big paper to be reading, make sure we have a lot longer than a couple of nights to read it over, because the agendas are far too long in the first place at the moment. So we certainly would need a lot of reading. Can I just also clarify, Councillor Raw seems to have left the screen. Has she actually left the meeting?
Yes, Chairman. Councillor Raw has declared a pecuniary interest on the basis of her employment with Derbyshire County Council and has left the meeting on that basis. Okay,
thank you. Can that please be noted? Thank you. Okay, then we will move on. Questions. Councillor Flitter, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just an insight for Paul. What was the position of Derby City now? With them not going through into phase 2? What's the latest thinking that they're in? What's their position? And under under 2.2, I get a bit of a mixed message, because you talk about a step change and then you talk about acceleration into an exciting project. And I'm just getting a few cross wires there. And I think the third question that I had, you've just answered very aptly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can take paragraph 2.2 first. I think we need to perhaps appreciate the context in which phase 1 of Vision Derbyshire was taking place. And it was very much in the context that government wanted rapid change, it wanted greater collaboration, it wanted efficiencies, and it wanted it at scale. So what we've sought to demonstrate through the Case for Change proposition is that we can deliver all of that. We can deliver the government's levelling up agenda, but also we can do it in a context which doesn't require unitarisation as a prerequisite. And when members see the proposition Case for Change that I will bring to you in November, hopefully you will see that within there in terms of the areas it looks to focus upon. In regard to Derby City have been very clear from the outset that whilst they are interested in Vision Derbyshire, they do not want to take part in it from the outset, because they see a very different scenario emerging. They have also, or their leader has also written to the Secretary of State asking for a discussion regarding local government reorganisation and potential expansion of their boundaries. In what direction and to what scale they may extend, that hasn't been clarified. But clearly they see the need to expand their own unitary authority in order to meet the challenges that they face at the moment. So the door remains open to Derby City, and the leader of the County Council has made that clear on a number of occasions, but at this moment in time they are not inclined to participate in this particular initiative.
Thank you. Does that help, Councillor Flitter?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. I mean, it doesn't look like things have changed at all, really, from their position a few weeks ago. I had thought that they'd come to some sort of decision in their recommendations, and I just thought whether it was public knowledge or not.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Councillor Ratcliffe, please.
Yes,
Question.
thank you, Chair. So I'm sticking to protocol. I'd like to preface my comments by asking Paul if you would just give me your reflection on what I'm saying and your response. Yeah. So that's this is my question to you. I am assuming now that as much as anything, Vision Derbyshire, notwithstanding the county council and indeed Derby City, is a form of devolution in itself. The intention of those who signed up to it is that we form our own alliance, as it were, almost a form of unitarization in itself. Now, some of my, dare I say it, inside knowledge leads me to believe that there's still not complete unanimity on some of the things that have gone into the financial detail, the strategic points within this Vision Derbyshire document. There are some who still, perhaps somewhat cynically, believe that the outcomes, as it were, are already there and replicated in a lot of the partnership working that already goes on between borough and district councils in Derbyshire. My second thing, you may or may not know this, but it wasn't actually mentioned, and you've not alluded to it as such. I don't think so anyway. That there has been a letter to Robert Jenrick, the chap that is leading this sort of devolution, the thoughts at central government, as late as the 13th of October, putting forward Vision Derbyshire as a primary objective, irrespective of what the county and the city are doing. So it does seem to me that what you do have now is the agreement of all the other boroughs and districts that have signed up to this, that this is now on the tracks and moving forward. And we want to see it being accepted by government. The second thing is, and again, I can't tell you where I got it from, but I know that Robert Jenrick wrote to all the Conservative members of Parliament, and it has been leaked, as it were, to others, advising district leaders. I don't know whether, again, Gary knows of this, that he has now quite definitely stated that there is no intention whatsoever to compel anyone to go down the unitarization route if they do not so choose. I'm reading this directly now.
Councillor Ratcliffe, I'm going to have to stop you there because a lot of this is just about hearsay and speculation, and I don't really think the questions in the fact of this is that we are actually looking for agreement to whether this goes across, and I don't think some of these questions are pertinent as regards what is being done by the government at the moment, other than the fact the white paper is sat on the side for future times.
Well, I'll form this into a question then. If there is no direct compulsion on the local authorities to go down the unitarization route, it would seem that there is a little bit more time available for us to firm up some of these points about the financial structure and outcomes, as it were, of Vision Derbyshire, so that there is a very clear and precise document that people are going to sign up to and put into effect. Because, as I say, it seems to me that we are definitely going down this route. I'm sorry, Paul, I've gone on.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ratcliffe. I'll see whether Paul has got any form of a reply to some of this.
Yeah, no, I can help members and Councillor Ratcliffe on a number of points there, Chairman. I think the first point to make is that Vision Derbyshire was not just a vehicle to avoid local government reorganisation. It was a factor because Derbyshire authorities don't believe that the disruption, cost and loss of productive time that you inevitably experience when you go through reorganisation, which would, probably take 2 years. That tends to be the timescale that authorities have gone through this exercise tend to work to. You would lose 2 years of initiative because you would be completely distracted by structures and so on and so forth. So Vision Derbyshire was one means of saying we don't need to go through all of that. We can actually deliver the benefits of a unitary structure whilst retaining individual sovereignty within our own respective authorities. And that is very much the view of the 9 county district borough leaders who've signed that letter to the Secretary of State. Having said that, I think everybody acknowledges, particularly given the current financial situation that the country is in, that whilst the years of austerity have been said to be over, we are in the future going to be in for some very difficult challenges ahead. And inevitably, local government, I would expect, is going to be part of the solution to trying to address some of those financial issues. So the other aspect of Vision Derbyshire is how can we work better together? How can we retain our existing structures, work better together? But most importantly, how can we deliver better outcomes to our communities? Because the vast majority of our communities, I would suggest, don't really care who delivers their services, as long as they deliver good services, and that their council tax is not excessively high, and that we provide ample opportunities for them to improve the quality of their life. That's what our communities are interested in. Whether that's Derbyshire Dales, Bolsover, Chesterfield, North East, who delivers it, they probably don't really care, to be honest. It's just a matter of geography that an individual authority is responsible for delivering their services. So Vision Derbyshire is trying to break down some of those barriers and improve outcomes, make service delivery much more cost effective without going through the pain of local government reorganisation. Turning to the Secretary of State's letter, I have seen that letter. It is publicly available, I think. And the Secretary of State has clarified the government's position on this. And just to summarise, they have said that locally led changes to structures in local government is what they would very much support. And that is perfectly in tune with what Vision Derbyshire is all about. They've said that they would not impose unitary structures. It's not compulsory and it's not required. So again, that is support for the Vision Derbyshire concept. And perhaps most significantly, there will be no top-down restructuring. So again, that is an indication that they are supportive of the type of work that we are doing. But what they have said, and this I suggest will come in the white paper, is that there is a need for more collaboration at scale. Because, as we want to be more competitive, both as an individual authority, as a county, and as a region, we've got to be able to demonstrate to government that we justify that devolution of power from Westminster down to the local level. But with power comes accountability, and we've got to demonstrate that we've got the right structures in place to be accountable for those particular devolution deals that may be coming to us in the future. So hopefully I've picked up a few of your points there, Councillor Ratcliffe, but if there's anything I've fundamentally missed, please let me know.
No, you've given me a really excellent response, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Purdy, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Paul, for those comprehensive answers, which have taken some of the words out of my mouth. But just to emphasise, if I may, to particularly Councillor Ratcliffe, Paul has alluded to and read from the letter, which, yes, I did receive and all leaders received. And it's a common theme that Robert Jenrick has said all throughout this last few months on the DCN conferences, that there will be no top-down government instruction that they are looking for change and that they support locally led. And so we have got locally led. We've got all 9 leaders signed up to Vision Derbyshire. I think where we're at is the fact that Derbyshire County Council leaders took a paper to Cabinet, which first of all placed Vision Derbyshire as the #1 priority to be accepted by government, but then made a recommendation that if that failed, then they would seek Derbyshire unitarisation. So that triggered a letter by district council leaders, chief execs and borough leaders to say that we don't want unitarisation. So we're all in this together. We are not falling out, but there's obviously some positional changes being put forward. I think what we're about here is strictly speaking, the bottom line is saving our district and borough councils, because if unitarisation happens and or mayor, then they will go. So I've been very, very strong, as I know former leader Councillor Lewis Rose was, in protection of this authority. It's all about money as well at the end of the day. There is a good lever, and that's why governments want mayors. They're a good lever for feeding money in. But the leaders of Derbyshire and Chief Executive decided that's not the model we want. So unfortunately in the Midlands, and indeed in the East Midlands, we don't get the monies that the West Midlands get, or now the Manchesters get, or the Liverpools get. And that's what we leaders and chief execs are pushing very, very strongly for the betterment of our own communities. So I do hope that Vision Derbyshire is accepted by government. It has been put into the long grass for a little while. We don't know when. I think it will come back in the new year. So I'm happy to move the recommendations, Chair, and especially to note recommendation 5, which is vital to allow the chief executive room for manoeuvre, because this is a fast moving feast and it's important that we give them that leeway. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll take note that that's been moved. I'm not looking for a seconder as yet. I'm just going to move on because of people asking questions. Councillor Chapman.
Thanks, Chair. I've had my question sort of answered, but I'd just like to put to Paul, with 9 constituent, shall we call them councils, how confident are you that this will be a straightforward, cooperative, collaborative union? I mean, looking from experience within the National Park, which is 11 constituent councils, and I know it's not the same comparison, but there always does tend to creep into these kind of organisations a certain amount of, shall we say, self-interest. So how do we sort of, how confident are you that Vision Derbyshire will be able to overcome that?
You, Chair, I think you make a very valid point, Councillor Chapman, and I will be perfectly honest, it's not been without its challenges to get to the point that we are currently at. But over a period of 18 months, we have managed to keep everybody at the table, and everybody is seeing the benefits of Vision Derbyshire. There might be certain aspects which some are less comfortable with than others, but the overriding concept of what we're trying to achieve has received unanimous support across all 9 authorities and leaders. But clearly, as this gains traction and we start to bring it to life with real life projects, then it will start to challenge some of those views and opinions. And it might well do that for the Derbyshire Dales. There might be something that comes through Vision Derbyshire which we may not be entirely comfortable with. But I think the responsible thing is to show that we can work together and that we can work for the greater good, even if on occasions that might necessitate compromise on some part or another. So I'm very optimistic, but I'm not so naive to think it won't be without its challenges.
Thanks, Paul. Chair, may I second that?
Yes, I will take that as your second, but I'm still going to continue because there are a couple more questions, I believe. Councillor Buttle, please.
Hi, yeah. I'm going to ask Paul if he could speculate. The government, I believe, think they're going to save £3 billion a year through this reorganisation. Where are we going to see less money?
That is some speculation, isn't it? I know. Well, if history is to repeat itself, what you tend to find is that the revenue support grant which we receive from government tends to be cut year on year. And that's been the case with governments of all political persuasions going back to 2008 onwards. So what you tend to find is that there is more reliance on the authority being self-financing through its own sources and less reliance on government funding. And Derbyshire Dales is now very, very close to the point whereby actually we get relatively small amounts of money from central government, and we are not too far away from being totally self-financing. So I think that is the likelihood moving forward, but clearly that poses real difficulties for us because our citizens' expectations inevitably increase. Costs increase year on year as they do for our own household budgets, and trying to balance the books becomes very, very difficult. So I think that's where we as a council have got to be very clear what priorities we want to deliver on, and that's why the corporate plan is so critical, because you've defined that corporate plan as your ambitions over this 4-year administration, and we really need to make sure that at the end of the administration we can all turn around to our constituents and communities and say that, yes, we delivered on our promises. But there will be some difficult decisions along the way, there's no doubt about that.
So just to be absolutely clear, you think we're going to get less money out of this, whatever happens, whether we go Vision Derbyshire or not?
I do not think the local government sector will escape any reductions in funding as national government seeks to eventually sort of balance the deficit which we are building through COVID.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Slack, question?
Thank you, Chair. Where do we start? This is a very difficult one, really, when you look at it in the depth of it. It's very, very good, the shared services. It saved us a lot of money. We've worked together very successfully in IT and other areas. And it's good shared partnership. It is really good. It's similar to when the European Union, when the Europe started up, really, Union, before the Union. And they traded together as a union, and with goods and backwards and forwards. And then suddenly it became a bigger thing. It became more intense. It became more togetherness and a union. And I feel it's a little microcosm of that, really, because it'll do that eventually. The big unitary authorities get more powerful, as we've seen recently in Manchester, Liverpool, Sheffield. All of the big unitary authorities are very strong authorities. There's no doubt about it. The little authorities usually get swallowed up by them, really, such as Derbyshire Dales would be swallowed up because it's a little rural authority. And that's not good. That isn't good, because as a councillor, I've always looked to serve the people I represent. And if you're not serving the people you represent, if you get too big and too remote, you don't serve the people you represent. And I think if this happened to Derbyshire Dales, it wouldn't be good if we got swallowed up by a big unitary authority. But it looks to be going that way. Same as Paul said, just less reliant on the state. For a moment, I thought, well, I'm relying on Nassau, but that he didn't mean that. He meant to say all council tax should go to the council, which it should do. It shouldn't go to government. All the private catch businesses pay should go to to the council. So that's good in a way, but we've got to watch as we don't get swallowed. It could happen, and I think it may happen in time, because
Councillor Slack, can I ask, have you actually got a question? I know these are comments that you make.
Yeah, my question was, is this going possibly to happen, Paul?
Well, through you, Chair, that's what Vision Derbyshire is trying to avoid. You know, it's very clear one of the ambitions of Vision Derbyshire is to avoid the need for disruptive, costly reorganisation. Now, you know, we all understand and we see it day in, day out, the benefits of district councils. We are much closer to our communities. We understand them better. We are more responsive than large unitary structures can be. And that is one of the advantages of two-tier local government. However, that view is not necessarily universally held by some ministers or even previous governments, because previous rounds of local government reorganisation have always focused on the concept of biggest is best. But when you're dealing with a geography such as Derbyshire, that doesn't necessarily ring true. And what Vision Derbyshire is trying to demonstrate is actually biggest is not best. You can retain the benefits of the two-tier structure whilst delivering the benefits of unitarisation as well. And that's the case that we're trying to prove.
Thank you, Paul.
Councillor Allison, have you got a question?
Thank you, Chair. I understand the concepts under Vision Derbyshire, the aspects of shared services and the better service that can give to our communities. What I'm struggling with is to try and understand the political structure and how that will work. So you've got these disparate councils, all under kind of different political leaderships, different parties leading those councils. How do you envisage that's going to work together?
This is still a part of Vision Derbyshire which is in development. But the concept that's emerging is that you could effectively have a joint committee, and that joint committee would include a representative from each of the relevant district, borough and county council. Clearly that representative would feed back to the respective district and borough councils, and individual districts and boroughs would still be able to make their own decisions. So you would effectively give a mandate to that representative who would sit on the Vision Derbyshire Joint Committee to represent the views of your individual authority. It is clearly not conceivable to have committees comprising members from every single authority. It would be way too large and unwieldy. So the joint committee model is something which is currently being explored and may well have some potential, but there's no final decision been made on that yet.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move back to Councillor Purdy just to reiterate his proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to answer Councillor Slack's point, if I may, this is what we're fighting for, Councillor Slack. We don't want unitarisation. We want to protect our Derbyshire Dales as do the other district, council and borough leaders. On Councillor Allison's point, Paul is correct. It's a governance model that's the critical factor to this. And so the thoughts are that probably a representative, as Paul said, probably a leader from each authority. And to answer Councillor Chapman's point, yeah, there's been many challenges, David, and there's a lot more challenges ahead. But I think for the moment, what I need to say finally, Chair, is this, that there will be no automatic sign-off of this. Any acceptance by government would come back to our district authority for approval by members. So please don't think we're going to run this under you. In no way, shape or form is that thought process going. It will be open and transparent, and each step and stage along this probably torturous way will be brought back to you.
Thank you very much for making that clear. Are there any other members who wish to make any more comments on this? Councillor Hobson.
Chair, thank you. I will be supporting the motion. I think Paul's had a very difficult task so far. Obviously, the preferred option of local government reform is the Vision Derbyshire, but we are giving him the authority to participate in discussions, and I've got full faith that he will represent the best interests of the Derbyshire Dales residents to the best of his ability. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think I will echo that as well. Yeah, this district does work well. We do work under the second tier, but I think we do as much work as county, and we don't want to be left out as a little fish in the sea when money's being handed out if it goes to East Midlands, because if we go to Leicester and Nottinghamshire, then I must admit we're we're not going to see anything. We already have the issue when it comes to planning because of having the national park and the likes of that. So I do, in my opinion on this one, do back Paul to make sure that he's got the best interest of the district council and Councillor Purdy, who's working along with it to get the best out of it for all of us within this area. Are there anybody else who would wish to make any more comments? Then upon that, it's been moved and seconded on the recommendations 1 to 5. Everybody's clear upon that, I hope. Yeah, then I will go to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If you could indicate whether you're for, against or abstain. Councillor Allison.
For.
Councillor Archer.
For.
Councillor Ball.
For.
Councillor Buttle.
For.
Councillor Chapman.
For.
Councillor Cruz.
For.
Councillor Donnelly.
For.
Councillor Flitter.
For.
Councillor Hill.
For.
Councillor Hobson.
For.
Councillor Morley.
For.
Councillor Purdy.
For.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
For.
Councillor Slack.
For.
And Councillor Sutton.
For.
It's unanimous.
Thank you very much for that. Then that one motion is passed, and I think it shows tonight, Paul, that we all hold faith in you to make sure that we get the best out of what there is to be had. And I would like to say thank you very much to everybody for a well questioned and debated evening. And good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Good night, folks.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.